Donnie, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Vic, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm 44 years old. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I have been my entire life, more so up to before the encounter happened. I still do venture out into the woods. I do it in completely different areas now. I work on heavy equipment. I'm kind of a matter-of-fact kind of guy. I never was one to play practical jokes on people. I'm just your average country boy. Now I live in the city for reasons most people can understand. That's really about it.
You know, Donnie, it didn't take much time talking to you to figure out how nice of a guy you are. You're about as nice and genuine as they come. That's one of the reasons why it was so hard to hear how hard hit you were by this encounter that you had. Please tell us about the area where you had this encounter, because that plays a huge part of what we're going to be talking about today.
I had originally found this area in 1998. I had moved into some condos that were not even an eighth of a mile away from Tucson Wildlife Research Center, and that bordered on the fringes of Fort Meade in Maryland. I had rode over this bridge and I had seen what we call a creek to some people, or a creek. I call it a river. And it doesn't matter if it's 10 feet wide, it's the river. A small stream is called a branch. But I had rode over this bridge and I saw this river and I said, man, that looks like a nice place to fish. So I had a four-wheel drive truck, so I pulled it off the side of the road and I walked down the embankment. At this time, I was by myself. I had no fishing pole. I was just looking at the area to see if it would be conducive to do any fishing. And when I got down there, I was pleasantly surprised. So I scouted around just a little bit, walked back up the embankment, and got in my truck and left. In a matter of a day or two, I called a couple friends of mine that I fish with on a constant basis, and I explained to them what I found and what it looked like, and I said, you know, guys, I think we really need to give this a try. This got in the way, and that got in the way. We really didn't get to try this river out until the year 2000. The first time, I had went by myself. I took my dog. I had a pit bull named Obi. I took him with me, and I parked the truck. But this time, my dog would not get out of the truck. You know, I would pull on his lead, and, you know, he would set his feet firmly on the seats, pushing against me. So after 5 minutes of that, I said, okay, you want to stay in the truck? Stay in the truck. You know, it wasn't a hot day, so I rolled the windows down and went down and just threw a line in the water. If you fish in a creek or river, you can almost look at a spot, you know, where the water's a little deeper and where current's running and, you know where the fish are. But, you know, I caught 2 or 3 nice smallmouth bass right there on the edge of the river. At that point, I was hooked. But when you walk down this embankment that is under the bridge as it crosses the river, one side goes north and the other side kind of heads south. The side that heads south looks so much better, but it was the property of Fort Meade. They had all kind of signs and skull and crossbones that people would put up, and, you know, the do not enter signs. All the kind of signs you expect to see to try to keep a man out. They actually had a fence running down the edges, right to the edge of the water, you know, to keep people out. Well, to me, that's not going to keep me out. I get in the water anyway, so I had fished the creek alone just a little bit with no problems and had really good luck. Where I lived at the time, there was 2 young men, boys, men, whatever you want to call them. they had a father that worked all the time, and he was kind of the, I don't want to say nerdy type, but he was kind of not outdoorsy at all. I don't know if these kids have ever been in the woods at all. So, I was going to go fishing without the two people that I normally fish with. I was going to take these two young men fishing and try to get them to, experience the outdoors a little bit and just see how nice it could be. They had nothing to fish with. I supplied everything they needed. And we got in the truck and we drove the quarter of a mile, which, we could have walked if we wanted to. We got ourselves together and I explained to those young men about fishing while walking in the river. When you're walking in the current, it's a whole lot different than walking on land. Both of these boys were athletic. They played sports. They had no problems. So we fished for a while, and, they were catching fish, and they had a smile as wide as Texas. They were having a good time. We got to a point of the river, and we were fishing. The younger of the two brothers, he froze. He was frozen. He dropped the fishing pole. His brother knew something was wrong. And when his brother tried to ask him, he said, "We got to go now." And that's all he kept saying. "We got to go now." Well, I didn't see nothing or hear nothing, and neither did the older brother. Something spooked him. I don't know what it was. But whatever it was, it scared the hell out of him. So we left. About that point, kind of too late for me to go back, so I called it a day. So I got in contact with my friends, and I said, "Are you guys up for this weekend? I'm going fishing." They were all for it. Off we went. We get at the fishing hole. It's kind of dark. When we fish, we really concentrate on being as stealthy as we can. Not that we're trying to sneak up on anybody. This river winds and kind of reminds you of being in Vietnam, that the foliage was that thick. This was at the middle of July or so. So, it was summertime, the plants were growing. And this area was very low. If you went down the road a little further, it was all swampy. It gives you an idea of the ground and the soil. I don't think I've ever been there where the soil's been dry. Even up on land, the soil's kind of black. But anyway, we get in there, and as you start to fish up the river a little ways, you end up in an area where the river has cut through the land over years and years. You have embankments on each side of you, and they're about 6 feet vertical, and they're mud. So there's really nowhere to go when you're in that river other than walking the river. My one friend and I noticed at the top of the land, looking down on us, was an animal that we don't have in Maryland. It was a coyote. And he was interested in us. Mostly coyotes, from what I understand, if they get a whiff of a human, they're gone. This thing was kind of interested in us. We thought, that was strange. And we went down a little further, and we saw 2 coyotes. And we could hear them yipping, so we knew there was more than 2. However, we only seen 2. We didn't feel like we were in any danger or anything like that. We continued to fish with no real problems. We were catching fish and having a good time. We fished up to where we normally fish. It's called the Patuxent River, but there's many, many parts. You got the Little Patuxent, the Patuxent River, the Upper Patuxent. The part we fished in was just little small parts of the Patuxent River. We fished that whole day with, no other problems. One of the men that I fish with, he's deaf. I can sign language a little bit, but, I don't know a lot. The other guy, he's a police officer, and He's also got a little bit of outdoor experience. I don't think he's got the experience that I have, but, he's been hunting and fishing periodically. But that's kind of rattled us both, and I remember talking about that all the way home because, I would drop these guys off at their house, and we had talked about that. Did we really see coyotes? I know what a coyote looks like. I've seen them, out west. I know the way the dog's built. I know the sound of a coyote, and that's what we saw, coyotes. Like I say, they were taking a great interest in us. At no time did they ever try to jump in the river or anything like that. They were curious nonetheless. So we left that day. We had made plans. At that time, I was working every other Saturday. You can't hunt and fish all the time. You got to spend time with the family. September of 2001, we decided we were going fishing. And I remember the excitement of it. We went to the store and bought a few new lures, and, that stuff doesn't excite some people. But when you're a fisherman, to buy a couple new lures and maybe a fishing pole or whatever, that's exciting to me. That's just part of my inventory. I guess we got there about 5:45 in the morning. Still wasn't daylight. So all we had when we go in the water is a pair of shorts, and we used to always wear cleats because, it can be slippery, and the cleats just give you a type of security to where you don't slide around so much. And, they dig into the sand at the bottom of the river just like they would dig into the dirt when you were playing softball. We had got about maybe an eighth of a mile, 3/16 of a mile up in the river. You got to remember, this river, just doesn't flow straight. It's really windy. And when the water gets high, it erodes places on the sides that when the water goes back down, you're left with like a little baby beach. My friend looked down, there was this track in the sand, and it was a canine track. We all pretty much agreed on that. But the weird part, Vic, was this thing had 5 toes. Not like a dog where it would have 4 toes and then the back pad. This thing had 4 distinct toes, and you could see in the sand, I'm not going to call them fingernails, I'm going to call them claws. They were very, very predominant claws. But at that particular point, we only saw one. And, that's kind of weird. Well, the big guy, the deaf man, he had looked around and he had found another track right at the edge of the foliage where the undergrowth stopped growing, and that became the river. Found another track right at the very edge. You can tell left from right when you're looking at these. I don't know if whatever this was on a dead run or walking, jogging, what it was doing, but it was 6 feet from that track to the track in the sand. And then it had the obstacle of crossing a small part of the creek, which was about 10 feet wide at that point. We looked around a little more, and we saw the other track where it had hit on the side close to the water. And you could tell these tracks, especially the last track in the sand, was a little deeper, like something had pushed off. And same with the other, it was deeper than probably what it should have been. And that to me adds up as where, it had landed. I don't think it ever touched the water. That was really strange to us, but it didn't really spook us. We said, that's a big animal, because my friend got a Great Dane, and she has some big feet. But when she walks, she leaves her footprints, but she doesn't really leave any toenail prints. Not like this. We kind of discussed it, and I remember the big guy, Bones, with him not being able to speak, he kind of just took his hand and, waved it off like, whatever. He wanted to fish. So we continue up, and like I say, we are almost combat stealthy. The only thing you can hear when we're fishing is when we throw that lure, and the lure hits the water, and it makes that kaboom sound. We fished way up. Way up. We were half a mile, 3/4 of a mile up into the creek. And I know these measurements because this creek crosses under certain roads, and I know how far it is. But if you add in all the curves, it's not just a straight line. It's probably further than a half a mile. And at this point, we're in part of the creek where the embankment is vertical. I don't think you could get out if you tried. You'd have to have a piece of rope tied to a tree maybe, and you might get up the river embankments because the mud was that kind of red clay that they have down in Georgia, but it was slippery as hell. It was just, real slippery. So we never really messed with it. We're fishing and catching fish here and there, and, there's no talking, and other than the click of a lighter where I was the only one that smoked, the click of a lighter would be the only real noise we would make. And, we would see deer and beavers, we would see raccoons, herrings, all kind of animals. And sometimes we would just stop fishing and watch the animals. Especially, I used to love to watch raccoons, how they manipulate their front hands. They can flip over a rock, catch a crayfish, or a crawdad, whatever you want to call it, and bring it up to their mouth and eat it. And they eat it so fast, they eat it, discard of what's left of it, and start looking for more. To me, being an outdoorsman, that's not something that's just neat to watch. It's something that you can appreciate. If you love the outdoors like I do, you appreciate what comes with it, if you understand what I'm saying there. We went up the creek a little further, and you get to a part of this creek where a enormous oak tree had fallen for whatever reason. The wood didn't break, the roots and all blew over. And I remember the roots being feet above my head. That left a hole, a perfect fishing hole. And, we were excited to get to that point. I think we had made a few casts. If you can picture 3 men in a river, one to the left, one to the middle, and one to the right. My friend Bones, he kind of froze in his tracks like he was seeing something that he didn't know what it was. Both of us looked over and looked to where he was looking, and I'll be honest with you, whatever it was busy, because all we could see was the back. At that particular point in the river, a small branch, a little tiny creek, whatever you want to call it, flowed into the main river. That was one of the only points to where if you wanted to walk out of there, you could walk out that way and get up on the land and walk out. And I'm looking at this thing, your mind's going a million miles an hour. Can't be a bear because we don't have no bears at this part in central Maryland. I've heard of bears wandering down close, but not this close. But we were on the line of Fort Meade and that wildlife center, so who knows what it could have been. But that all ended when this thing turned and looked at us. I can't speak for the other men, but I can say to myself, I was like, this is not a bear. And I did leave something out, I'm sorry. As we were coming up on this spot, we had heard a commotion in the water. We didn't know if it was beavers. Beavers will flap its tail when they see or hear something coming to warn the others. But it wasn't a terrible commotion, just a commotion. And with us walking against the water, and this water was clear enough you could see the bottom. I don't care if you were in 6 feet of it, you could still see the bottom. Very clear water. And we noticed that there was mud in the water. When a deer's in trouble, it'll make that bleating sound. I call it bleating. I don't know, across the country, I'm sure it's used in different words, but in human terms, it's a scream. When we made it to that area, I had saw the rear end of a deer right at the edge of the creek. And this animal was on the deer. When it noticed us, it turned its head and looked at us. At that point, it had made just a few moves to where I could see more of this creature. The middleman, he was a police officer, and the guy we call Bones, everyone, I guess, was trying to do the same thing I was doing, trying to wrap their head around what we were seeing. First, I had thought bear. I think massive dog may have crossed my mind at one time. But anything that can pull a white-tailed deer down like that and hold it down has got to be very strong. Anybody out there that knows white-tailed deer, they can be very resilient, especially when they're fighting for their life. Our deer here in Maryland, we don't have huge deer. They run 120 to 150 pounds. That's big enough. And I challenge anyone to go out and jump on a deer and try to wrestle it to the ground. I would put my paycheck on it that you're going to walk away bruised, battered, and probably with some stitches. As this thing looked at us, I could see off the right side that it was holding this deer down in the water. I don't think it was trying to bite the back of the neck per se, like a cougar or a bear or any major predatory animal. This thing was holding the animal down with brute force, with one hand. And when he saw us, he immediately spun around, and the word I'm going to use is ballerina. This thing turned around, holding the animal down with one hand, in an instant put its foot where its hand was to continue holding the animal down, which at this point I think it was pretty much expired. It had died. And there was a little bit of blood in the water, but not a lot of blood that would indicate that there was a lot of physical trauma to this deer. But there had been some trauma somewhere. I didn't see it. So when this thing turned around and looked at us, I can speak for the other men. We all froze. And we froze for a good 3 or 4 seconds. We were nothing but statues in the water. When your brain is looking at something like that, your brain's working at warp speed trying to figure out what it is. Because from what I understand with a lot of scientific studies, when you look at something and you've never seen it and you don't understand what it is, your brain is trying to compare it to something that you already know. Well, this thing was something that I didn't know, something that wasn't supposed to exist. In my time in the woods, I had never seen anything like this. I had never heard about anything like this. You know, I've heard about the boogers. While down south, right on the border with Georgia, I had a booger sighting. It was at a long ways, but, you know, they were accepted. Even my father told me at a young age in the woods when we started hunting, keep your wits about you. Don't just look around you, you know, look up. My father never let on, but I'm convinced that he knew something, and maybe he was planning on sharing it with me when I was a little older. I don't know, because he's passed on now. You know, I don't know what he was going to tell me. But my father was a very good hunter, taught me everything he knew. He was a very good marksman, and he passed all that down to me at a very, very, very young age. So here I am, 30 years later. I'm looking at something that, Vic, it's not supposed to exist. other than in movies. When this thing turned around, we do the same thing with animals, usually, as we do with people. We look at the head or the face first to try to recognize what it is. And if you could cross a baboon, a hyena, and a wolf together, you would almost sum up what the face looked like. It had a mane, not like a lion's mane, but had real thick fur around the head and neck. And the shocking part was this thing was on 2 feet. It looked comfortable down on all fours while I was dispatching of this deer, but it looked just as comfortable, if not more comfortable, when it got up on 2 feet. I had never heard the term dog man up until maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. And, this happened in 2001. So I didn't know what I was looking at. All I know what I was looking at was it wasn't supposed to exist. The massiveness of this animal, the body structure. It didn't really have paws. I'm going to call them hands. Not like a man's hand. Much larger, much longer. Almost if you could take a wolf's paw and stretch it out. Stretch the middle part out between the front toe pads and the rear pads. Stretch that part out and then stretch the fingers out. I want to make it very clear, this was the middle of the day. This is not something that I caught in the corner of my eye in the middle of the day, and we're kind of having, at this point, a Mexican standoff. And it wasn't that we were trying to be brave and face this animal, as we were frozen in fear, shock, and I don't think either of us knew what to do. Well, while this thing was standing there, Bones, he kept looking over his shoulder to the embankment behind us. My other friend and I kind of caught on, and we started never wanting to take our eye off of this dog man, but we wanted to see what was behind us. And we never did see it. We heard it. That's when the fear almost set in tenfold, that we knew that this guy wasn't alone. I mean, to catch a deer in the middle of the woods, a deer can change angles. It could be going one way and make a left turn, make a right turn. And anything that catches a deer in the middle of the woods, and I know how fast a deer can run, has got to have speed, strength, and agility that we just don't understand. Maybe one of the superheroes that, the kids watch might have a chance. But this was a real creature. We had brought some pistols with us, only for coyotes, because, coyotes can be a little vicious. I know quite a bit about firearms. Anything from the smallest little .22 up into the .458 lot elephant guns or the .570 nitros and everything in between. I knew what we had. We would have been better off picking a rock up and throwing it. So we never did shoot. After we could move a little bit and kind of come back to reality, this thing made a bluff charge. With the first millisecond, I didn't know that it was a bluff charge. And everything ran through my mind at that point. Because I knew this thing was built from the ground up, if it chose to, be a killing machine. The speed in which it made those 3 or 4 steps was the speed of I want you to picture a cat that is swiping its paw at something really fast. Like maybe it's trying to, if a dog comes up to it, it might strike the dog in the face with the paw. You don't realize the paw has hit you until it's hit you. You know, you didn't even see it coming. But it stopped. This thing actually looked at all 3 of us like it was sizing us up. It wasn't just an animal standing there. It had sized us up. You could definitely see at that point that it would make a real quick look across the river. That just added to the fear. Standing in water, I'm not sure, but I really do. I think I wet myself because this is going against the grain of everything that I was taught, everything that I had learned, and a creature that don't exist. But I'm here to tell you they exist. They're real. So the only real option we had in order to get behind us was those vertical banks in the water. But the only way to really get up on the land would be to walk up, brush the dog man aside, step over what he just killed, and go up there. Well, I got news for you folks. That's not happening. You know, not me. But at the end of its little bluff charge, it growled at us. No barking or anything like that, but it growled at us. We were probably, at the most, when we stopped, 25 feet. And this thing took a 10-foot bluff charge. Now we're even closer. And when it growled at us, it opened its mouth a little bit. I could see the canines, or the teeth, whatever you want to call them. This growl was so deep. The lung capacity of this animal has to be incredible. In order to make that sound and hold that sound, it reverberated through every bone in your body. You really do. You think, if my family finds me, it's going to look like I've been chopped up and, ready to put into a mayonnaise jar. That's how well built these animals are. The legs of this animal, just to give you a little perspective, they were muscularly enormous. Now I wear a 32, 33 waist pants. Each of its thighs were about as big as my waist, if that gives you any idea of the lower part. And then the upper part, you could see dog features, but it was more manly. This thing actually had a chest, had biceps like a man. I'm not going to say the hands were like a man, because a man's hand is not that frightening to look at. This thing was kind of black in color with some gray, but the fingernails were coal black and a good inch long. Maybe an inch and an eighth, I don't know. And they were curved, but they weren't curved like a hawk or something like that. But they were curved. They were meant for grabbing something and holding on to it, kind of like a cat when it extends its claws. It can play with a mouse and just hook it with one of its claws. But these claws look like they could rip if they wanted to as well. They weren't like fingernails. They were flat. They were roundish. And they came down to that point. I can give you these descriptions because I was within spitting distance of this thing. It did have a tail, but by now we're trying to back out. We're walking backwards. Don't ask me why, but we still have the guns in our hand. I think had we fired a shot at that thing, it would have been our own demise. initially we had only brought the little handguns just in case the coyotes got a little crazy. Because there's times when we used to fish little rivers that we would carry the grating of a little hibachi grills, and I would put it in my backpack, and we would stop on the clear spot on the edge of the river, and, we would eat what we caught that morning. And I think back on that now, how stupid that was. But then again, for some reason, being, within a half mile of the road, and you're not far from civilization at all, it kind of takes the fear factor away. I'm sure it's nothing like being out in the Midwest, in the middle of nowhere, and worrying about a grizzly bear. I would have rather faced 2 grizzly bears at this point, because the evilness that comes with this thing, part of me wants to say that this creature is from somewhere else, that it's not here. Somehow it just made it here. But I'm slowly learning. Rick educated me a lot on a lot of things I didn't know. These things are indigenous to our land. I'm not talking right here in the middle of the country. I'm talking if they want to, right into suburban USA. Right in, your backyard. You never know if you have dogs outside that are going crazy, or if you have a dog that wants to crawl under the bed for no reason. There just might be a reason for that. Like I said earlier, I had a pit bull that I don't think he was afraid of anything. Before that day, he wouldn't get out of the truck. That really struck me as odd. And when you look back on these events, hindsight's always 20/20. Maybe seeing the tracks in the sand were enough to say, hey, we need to get out of here. This is something we don't know what it is. I had the average size hand. This print was bigger than my hand. So as we're backing out, slowly but surely, we could hear on the opposite bank something paralleling us that was not trying to be stealthy. It wasn't trying to hide from us. It did hide from us to the point where we really didn't see it. But you got to remember, we're down in the river. We would have to look up to see it. With the banks of the river being about 6 feet of mud, it could have been 6 feet off the side, and we couldn't have been able to see it. But regardless, it was paralleling us to the truck. Once we had got a quarter of a mile away, that's when we started beating feet as best we could. I don't know if this hurts the program or not, but I forgot to say about it did pick the deer up as we were backing out. This is something that didn't have to take its teeth and drag the animal like any other predator that I know of. This is something that it looked like a mature deer, picked it up and walked away with it. And the whole time in the background, you could hear the yipping of the coyotes, almost like they were in some kind of ecstasy. I don't know. As we were backing out, we crossed that sandbar that we had seen with the track. But this time, not only did we see the track that we had seen where it or another one had crossed right there as well, going the other way. So in reality, as we were fishing, these things were all around us. I'm sure now they watched us get out of the truck. I'm sure of it. But once we got where we thought we could turn around, and you can't run in thigh-deep water, but you can try to make your best effort. We got in the truck, and neither one of us had a fishing pole to bring back. We had dropped them. Not that I cared, but we dropped our fishing poles. When we got up to where the fence is, it's a real effort to get through. You almost gotta go underwater with your head and come back up. But we all got through, and the embankment where the bridge crossed to go up to the truck, it's probably 50 feet, I would say. Slimy, dirty, muddy. Well, I can guarantee you, Vic, we set the record in the time that it would take a man to get from the bottom of the top, to the truck. And, this was a brand new 2001 Toyota, which, people with their vehicles, they try to take care of them, and, I didn't care. I got in there wet, muddy, started the truck, took the guys home, and went home. And didn't say nothing to anybody. I've never said anything to anybody. This is the first that I've spoken to this. It's helped me a lot to talk about it. When I initially talked to Vic, I couldn't get my words out. And I'm sure he can attest to this, I was truly rattled. Because I was talking about something that I had tried to bury for 14 years. I'm not discounting anyone's experience with this, because it is truly a terrifying ordeal. And there's no words to describe the absolute terror of seeing something like this. Point in case, if a serial killer tried to kill you or whatever, your mind knows that that's a man and you go into your fight or flight mode. But when you see something like this, it adds a whole different type of fear to it. I try to explain it the best I can. Anybody that's never seen one, you are in my prayers that you never do. The good thing is we all did get out of there safely. We were scared, partially in shock, I guess, but we did get out. We made it. That about wraps it up. I would love to tell you guys that I fought off 20 dog men with a pocket knife, but that's not the way it was. It happened just as I told you. It's not something that I would ever want to see again. I definitely wouldn't go looking for one. Try to get a photo. If I see one again, which I pray to God I don't, hopefully I can deal with it a little better.
Donnie, you mentioned that you saw the dogman holding that deer down in the water as it seemed to be killing it. Was it drowning it, or was it killing it in some other way?
From what I could see, Vic, that little creek that comes in to the river, it isn't but a couple inches deep. I'm thinking that it had the deer around the neck somehow with its hands. And with the equipment that thing has on its hands, it could kill it, in many different ways. It may have drowned it. But like I say, I did see blood. But I didn't see blood on the rear part of the animal or the mid part of the animal, like it had torn it apart or anything. I did not see the head down there, like with the mouth trying to tear at it. With weapons like that on its hand, it could kill a deer quickly, taking the airway away. If it did use its claws, it could have ripped at the neck. That's the way I think it killed the deer. But when it growled, if you want to call it a growl, I don't know if it was after us or if it was defending its meal, but nonetheless, I wasn't going to make a step forward to find out. So if that helps you, that's really all I can answer.
You mentioned how it was big, but you didn't say exactly how big it looked. What's your estimation on that?
Well, I'm 6'1", the deaf boy. He's 6'9", and he's 340 pounds. He's a big man. And he's not fat, he's just big. This creature, let's call him Dogman, we know what it was. On the bottom part of the scale, 375, 400, easily. but with the gracefulness of a ballerina. I've never seen something that big move so gracefully and quickly. A grizzly bear, we all know, is a very big animal, powerful animal. But if you watch a grizzly bear when it's standing still and it takes off, it takes a second or two for it to get its momentum up, if you understand what I'm saying. This thing could almost go full speed from just standing there. If that sounds possible, and that might be something else that's hard to wrap your head around, is just how fast and cunning, very intelligent. I like to consider myself intelligent, but on some ways, I think these dog men have some kind of knowledge that, we, human beings, do not have. Go back to what I said about the quadriceps and the leg muscles on this thing. Each one was as big as my waist. That's a lot of strength. If you consider, take your bicep, for example. The average man's bicep. It's not big, but you can curl 40 or 50 pounds with one hand. And I'm talking about the average man, not bodybuilders, but the average Joe. Take a muscle that's literally 15 to 20 times that size and think of the power that it could have. It actually had biceps, not like a dog's front leg. This thing has some characteristics of a dog, but it's got a lot of characteristics of man as well. But those characteristics are amplified 20 times. The head was probably as wide as two German Shepherds, kind of a long head. It had like a furry mane around the head and maybe a quarter of a way down his back, which made it look even bigger and more imposing. Let's use a dinner plate, for example. When I put my hand on a dinner plate, I can almost touch the edges. If this thing put its hand on a dinner plate, its fingers would hang 4 or 5 inches off, to put it into perspective. I think I ran into a mature, in his prime adult. There was nothing juvenile about this thing. It just emitted fear. I mean, it looked like it could just reach into you and grab you. Almost had the attitude of, there's nothing you can do. You're at my mercy. If that makes any sense to you.
Oh, that does make good sense. I'm just so happy to see the change that I've seen in you since that very first conversation we had. When Donnie and I talked for the first time, he had such a hard time talking just to me about the encounter that he had. At one point, I was kind of concerned about whether he was going to even be able to relay the details of his encounter to me in the first place. To hear him talking about this now, sharing this publicly with you, the listeners, it's something that I didn't really think was going to happen. But, like I said, I am so proud of you, Donnie, to see the improvement in you. I can't tell you how happy that makes me.
I can't tell you how happy it makes me. This is something that I thought I would never talk about. I thought I would take it to my grave. In public, if you say the word Bigfoot, you get mixed results. If I was to go out there and say dog man, people would look at me and they might ask me, do you need me to call 911 for you? It's not their fault. People ride on their ride to work. They might ride through a section of forest and this, that, and the other, and they say, oh, I've been in the woods. Well, have you? Have you went out in the middle of the woods? I'm not talking about on the trail, off trail, and spent 3 or 4 days. This is something I've done my whole life. Deer hunting, sometimes I would try to stalk deer. I might go for miles and miles and not following a man-made trail. I was tracking that deer. Just like people don't see, they don't see dogmen, they don't see the boogers. if you get out in the woods and you really start looking around, you realize how much life is there, but you really don't see it just riding by in your car. You got to go out there. You got to sit. You have to be quiet. Depending on what you're doing, camo up, spray down with the neutralizing spray that, kills human odor. And, you'll find out the forest is full of things. Some things you might know about, some things you don't. I get at a loss of words sometimes thinking about this event. I don't know if it was an omen that had happened to me. It has intrigued me to research the subject, but until I run across Vic, there's nothing out there. A couple stories here and there, but unless you can talk to someone else who knows what they're talking about, and they finish your sentences before you do, you kind of know that you got somebody that you're talking about, and I'm talking about Vic here. He helped me a lot because at first, I never thought he would even call me back. Sure enough, he called. And something happened, and, he had to get off the phone. He said, I'll call you back. I said, okay. This guy thinks I'm, some nut from left field. And sure enough, he called me back. At one time, we had reception problems. And he didn't give up on me. He kept calling back. That showed me a lot about Vic's character right there. I mean, he wants to help people who run across these things, and they are out there. Don't make any mistake. Just because you have walked through the forest your whole life, I'm not trying to scare people from doing what they love, but for God's sake, pay attention to where you are, your surroundings, because if these things want to stay hid, they will stay hid. I think maybe I had just happened to run across a kill in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I wish that it had never happened. I wish I was on the end where I was skeptical and never seen it. But if you take a 400-pound animal with those kind of weapons that he has, the strength, the claws, the teeth, a human being would not have a chance. I don't care if you got a gun, a big gun. Because if this thing was to pounce on you, you wouldn't have time to aim it and shoot it. I don't want to offend some people, but Dogman is the perfect killing machine. And if you have more than one, which in our case we did, that makes your odds of survival way less. But the good part is we did get out. It was like it wanted us out of there and ran us out of there, and that it did. It shadowed us. When I mean shadowed, I mean followed us up until we got into the truck and we left. That is a spot I will not go fishing ever again. Back in the day, when I was a little boy, we used to go to the archery range. And you could go down that road, but they've changed it so much. They stop about a mile down the road from where I parked my truck. You make a left now. It's called Conway Road. You make a left, and that's how you go out to Crane Highway, Maryland Route 3. But the old road is still there. It's, kind of covered up in grass and all that, but it's still there. The wildlife refuge place in that area, it's really swampy. I remember riding through there as a little boy, creeped out. Like, this place is creepy. In the middle of the day, no sunlight penetrates the canopy. It reminds you of someplace in Vietnam. You see those Vietnam films where those guys are going through and they can't see no more than a foot in front of their face. That's what this place reminds you of. But initially, it looked like a beautiful place to fish. And it is a beautiful place. I mean, if you took a picture in the right spot, you'd have one gorgeous picture. But I'm not going back to take that picture, and I wouldn't advise anybody else to go back to take it. So, that's pretty much all I got to say as far as the encounter with the dog man. I just want to emphasize, when you're in a position and you're confronted with a dog man and there's nowhere to go, the only place to go would be to go through him, and that wasn't an option. I want people to understand, no matter how brave you think you are, or how much time you've spent in the woods, when you come across one of these things in full frontal view within 20 feet, this thing has eyed you up, not just you, but your group that you're with. And then it's communicating with somebody behind you, and that somebody is another dog man. I can't tell you the primal fear, the emotions that run through your body. I spent 2 years in Iraq and a year in Afghanistan. I had some scary moments over there. But nothing compared to this. Nothing compared to this. And the hard part is, who am I going to tell? Am I going to go to a game warden and say, excuse me, by the way, I snuck onto Fort Meade property and I ran into this creature that looked like something off of Underworld? What kind of reaction am I going to get? Even if these game wardens tend to know something, they never let on to it. To be honest with you, I wouldn't feel right sending one game warden in to investigate this. Because if he ran across it, he would be in the same boat that I was in. You would have to take multiple people. And if you did that, the dog man, he's not stupid. He's not going to stay. He's going to go. He's not going to walk up and confront 100 men. He's going to leave. They're not stupid. I don't know where they would get their intelligence from, but they are very smart. Very smart. I think their abilities as a hunter is second to none. Their abilities scaring people are second to none, because they did a very good job of that. The after effects of this are just as traumatic as the actual sighting.
We talked for quite some time about how this encounter has affected you. If you don't mind, please tell us about what you're going through, what you've been through as a result of that encounter that you had.
I don't sleep anymore. If I do sleep, it's a cat nap. I've had times where I envision this thing coming through the door. The nightmares that follow, it takes a part of me that I used to really enjoy. And when I say enjoy, I mean carefree. When you walk out in the woods, there's not supposed to be anything there that can hurt you or scare you. I had to be on anxiety medication for a while. Wouldn't go outside after dark. He couldn't pay me to go outside after dark. The other two fellows that were with me, I can't speak for them, but we're very close. The one guy now, and this guy never drank in his life, he's pretty much an alcoholic. The other man moved. He actually moved out of the area. That's an effect on somebody, pick up their whole family and move. He was in the police department. He transferred police departments, and this wasn't an opportunity for him. Like, okay, I got an opportunity to move. This was his own doing. Neither one of them fish anymore. We haven't really talked about it. The man that is deaf, the one that has turned into an alcoholic, he won't talk about it at all. I've asked him, what do you think it was that day? And he'll just turn around and walk away from you and start doing something. It's like it's trying to take his mind off of it. When you affect your sleep to the point my sleep has been affected, it affects your thinking. It affects all aspects of your life. My wife at the time, she knew something was wrong because my friend that was the policeman, I don't know what he told his wife, but his wife and my wife were best buddies. And my wife, out of the blue, told me, she goes, I don't want you going down there anymore. And I said to her, I said, what are you talking about? She goes, your favorite new fishing hole. She goes, I don't want you in there, around there. She goes, just stay out of there. And, that was that. I don't know what somebody said or somebody knew, but I didn't want anybody to know about what I saw. Because the ridicule out there for people that do see things, we're not crazy. We're not seeing, apparitions. We're seeing real things. And the people out there that are making fun of you and poking holes in you and, making you look like a fool, at times I say, you know what? Come on, let's go. I'm going to take you to a place. But on the other hand, I stop and I say to myself, just let them be where they are. And pray to God they never see it. And let them have their joy and laughter. Because we're looking at something, we don't know what it is. I'm sure some people know. People higher than our pay grade, I'm sure they know. A lot of things cross your mind. Is this some kind of a government experiment that has got out? Is it something that's come over from a parallel universe? I don't think so. I think this is definitely indigenous. The Indians talk about it. Other parts of the world have the same thing, from what I understand. In the infancy of my learning curve, but I'm hoping to learn some more, because it has intrigued me. I'm trying to look something up, but when you try to look it up, there's nothing there. It's almost like any information, real information that's put on the web, someone has pulled it off. I limit my fishing to maybe like a pond, say in in a field where I can see all around me. And even then, if a twig snaps, I can't get that enjoyment that I once had. Some people don't fish. I used to fish for just complete enjoyment and forgetting about the work week and having a good time. But the three people, that has all changed in a matter of an incident that was probably 25 minutes long by the time we got from the actual sighting to the charge to us backing out of there real slow and getting to the truck. The way the river went was the only safety. I think had I got up on land, may have been a mistake. I can if this and but this till I'm blue in the face, but what happened is what happened. I'm glad it happened that way because I did get out of there, and I'm here today to tell you what happened.
It's no secret, Donnie, that I absolutely love the topic of dog men, but I hate the effect that they have on the people who are unfortunate enough to run into them. Like I told you earlier, I can't tell you how happy I am to see the improvements in you that I've seen over the time that we've been talking on the phone about your encounter and the after effects that you just mentioned or whatnot. I can't tell you how happy that makes me. Having said that, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
I do. Don't go out in the woods looking for this thing. This is not a game that you want to play. This is not a game that you are prepared to play. Chances are you can go out, never see anything. But if you do, and you find yourself in a situation, it might just do to you what it's done to me and 2 other people. I'm not going to tell you it's ruined my life, but it's had effects on my life that I can't change. I just have to learn to live with them, try to understand them as best I can, and have the knowledge that this thing's not to be messed with. If you do go out in the woods, you don't even have to go out in the woods. This thing, I'm telling you, this thing is not afraid to come into a suburban area. So do your best to stay in pairs. Don't venture out alone. Just because you saw something on YouTube or what have you doesn't mean that it's okay to do it. Like I say, I'm 44 years old, and I'm talking to the young people here. I'm not trying to be your dad. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm also not trying to tell you that you can't enjoy yourself, because nobody wants to live their life in constant fear. But if you do venture out into the woods and forest, or you're a fisherman or whatever, go in pairs. Or take 3 people, 4 people, more the merrier. Skipping up to my age of people that are more mature. If you're hunting, depending upon the age that you hunt, you can see further in some places than you can the other. Watch up, down, left, and right. Look at the ground for tracks. Look in the trees for something that might be in the tree. Try not to put yourself in a situation to where your back is against the wall. Try to tactically put yourself at an advantage of where you're walking. Like if there's a cluster of trees or bushes or something you can't see into, distance yourself from it a little bit if you can, and try to walk around it where you can get a better bird's eye view of what that place is really about. Because as big as these creatures are, and the one I saw was every bit of 7 feet tall, they have the ability to hide. They can stay stone still, and you never see them. They may let you just go by, but you might run across one malevolent. Every creature that's born has a different mentality. I can tell you the dogman does not have the ability in its brain to walk up and give you a kiss. That's not his mentality. But you may have one that lets you go, or maybe if you feel watched, you are being watched. But if you see a dog man, even if it's 200 yards from where your stand is, get the hell out of there. Leave. Just because you got the latest and greatest high-powered rifle and you think you're protected from anything, I got news for you, my friend. You're not. You may as well take the rifle and take it home and play baseball with it, because it's good for hunting deer, but from what I've heard, dogmen are quite resilient to bullets.
Donnie, until you found the show, you felt like you were all alone. You thought you were the only person who had ever experienced something like this. Once you found the show, you found out that you weren't. I want you to remember that you're not alone in this. I'm always going to be here. If you ever need any help, I'll always be just a phone call away. Also, with all these people who are listening to this show, they're going to be pulling for you too. Well, Donnie, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all these details. I really do appreciate it. Thanks again so much for coming on. I hope you have a great night.
You too, Vic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear